first of all, I just want to commend you for putting things into place that keep you safe. You know, we really do have to, our needs and our safety, our emotional safety is really important in this as well. So I'm really glad to see that you're doing things for yourself. I'm going to hand the mic to Maureen now and let her jump in.
Well, I would be interested to know what the plan is to begin to see him or to interact with him more, because I think that maybe if there's a plan, he'll stop asking, you know what I mean, and then continue to work on himself. But I think it's awesome that she knows what she can do and what she can't do. But if there's a way to kind of say, well, you know, when you get past a couple of milestones, I think it might be time for a Zoom call. And then it might be time, if that goes well, it might be time for a visit or a short visit or at the place rather than coming home, and just make a plan with the counselor, hopefully, but just to understand, to have everybody understand kind of what it's going to look like, instead of there being this great unknown of maybe no one is ever going to want to come see me again. And, you know, it's hard to answer that without knowing all the particulars. But I think that, you know, we also want them to know that we're never going to be able to be, you know, close to them again.
And I'm kind of getting the sense that, you may not trust yourself. Maybe you need to do a little bit more work. And I'm not saying that as a criticism or a negative in any way. I think we all have to continue to work on ourselves, including myself, when it comes to this disease and keeping our boundaries. But the stronger you can become, and the more you trust yourself with saying, no, I'm not doing that, or no, I can't do that, or I love you, but that's not part of the plan right now. The better you get at that, the more you trust yourself and your own boundaries, the easier this will become. So
that's a great point.
You know, Maureen and I, both of us love the book Codependent No More. You know, that's a great place for you to start if you're trying to work on you and figure out why this is so hard, which is, you know, I often will have families, or especially parents, say to me, like, what's wrong with me? I'm so stupid, or I'm so, like, we get so down on ourselves because we feel like we're not doing this right. It's hard. So the more learning about boundaries that you can do, the more learning about codependency and about substance use, I don't want to say the easier it becomes, because I don't feel like it ever gets easy.
Well, I think it's easier to recognize when you're doing it in a way that you don't want to, you know? Yeah.
And I mean, and you ask at the end, any advice on how to handle a conversation when he gets into, when will you come and see me, or ask me to help him to do something? My advice is to figure out what you want to do. And if you don't have an answer in that moment and you're not sure, say that. Just say, I'm not sure right now when that's going to happen. Give me some time to think about it and I'll get back to you. One of the things that our people struggle with the most is impulsivity and being able to sort of sit in the unknown. They want immediate answers. They want you to take away their anxiety, and they want you to answer the question right now. So by saying, I'm not sure, let me get back to you, you're actually helping them develop the skills to be able to sit in that. Because I don't know about you guys, but I don't get answers every day, like the minute that I want them most of the time. That's life.
I think too, it helps us too to develop that skill, because we get so used to answering them as soon as they ask a question.
Yep.
And because we're scared, right? Like, operating out of fear is never a good idea. So that quick answer when you know, because you're feeling, well, if I don't answer them in the way that they need me to answer them right now, I'm afraid that they'll do this and that and the other thing. So we start giving answers that we may not have thought about. So, and this is all because we're all affected by the same, you know, those craving feelings, whether it's a craving to help and do, or it's a craving to use, it's all the same thing. And we wind up doing things that we wish we hadn't, because we don't sit with it like that. So we have to learn to sit with it too. And when everybody can do that, that's when the whole family starts getting well. But she's obviously somebody who's done a lot of work on herself. And that's really nice to see, even with the language that she used. So talk about things getting better. That was awesome.
That was really, really good. Yeah, when I was listening to you talk there, I was thinking about the study that you had brought to my attention. And I feel like this is such an important piece for our families to know, is that the part of the brain that lights up when we think about our loved ones, like especially getting into treatment, like saving them, is the same part of their brain that lights up when they think about the drug. So
It's
we
amazing, isn't it?
literally become addicted to saving our loved one. Like it's the same process.
It's this, yeah. It's the reason why we stand back and go, I can't believe I just did that. And they do the same thing. You know, they do the same thing. They slip or they relapse and they say, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. It's the same feeling.
Yep. Absolutely. And I mean, this is our entire reality. So we got to remember that it's here between our two ears. That's what creates our entire reality. So if there's any part of our brains that are a little sick, that's why we do things that we can't believe we're doing. We have a question from Facebook. Can you talk about the benefit of long-term treatment? My son is resistant to more than 30 days. How can I approach this with him? It's a great question. You want to talk about the benefits, Maureen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a person that believes that anybody that's in recovering needs a year of living in a supported environment, and graduated different. Maybe it starts out where it's detox, and then maybe 28 days or 60 days of intensive, and then slow release until by the end of the time they've been working for a little while, surrounded by people that are doing the same work on themselves. I think that's the way that we should. I was just reading again because I want to go here so badly and just see it. There's a place in Italy called San Patriano, and no one stays there for less than 3 years. Wow. Can you imagine? And they learn it.
Disorder.
What's that?
I said that would eradicate substance use disorder in my book. Like that would give us the best chance. Our numbers would be so much better.
And young people go in, and because they've spent a good part of their time getting, being consumed with this disease, they haven't learned a skill, and they may not know how to do certain things. So during that 3 years, they learn a skill, they contribute to the community, they become part of a community, all of the things that need to happen. So I think that really long-term treatment is probably the answer to really getting rid of this. And I desperately want to go there and look into it. But 30 days is nothing, right?
So I want to geek out for a second, and I apologize to anyone.
No, please do.
But I am a geek. I studied neuroscience. So I like to talk about the brain when it comes to this too, especially if you're going to approach your son with it, because oftentimes they don't even understand the neuroscience behind substance use disorder and addiction. So you've got two areas of the brain that are fighting. And I like to think of those two areas as a devil and an angel. Okay. Like when you think about those old school cartoons where there's a devil and an angel on each shoulder, that's really what's happening inside your kid's brain. So you have one area of the brain, which is where all of our survival tactics live. Okay. And that area learns that you need the substance to survive. Okay, anything that removes pain from a biological standpoint is typically something, at least historically, good. So the brain wants to remember that because it will associate that with survival, right? So now you have these substances that come in and remove pain amazingly well. The brain remembers that, and it remembers it subconsciously. Okay, so what happens is every time the pain comes, doesn't matter if it's physical or emotional. That's the thing. When we talk about pain, emotional pain, the brain can't really tell the difference between physical or emotional pain. It's just pain. So that part of the brain will start to say, the devil, it like whispers, you know what to do, you know what to do, you know what to do. Okay. So your child's brain is literally, your child is literally fighting his own brain. So now where do we win this war? It's with the angel. The angel is the prefrontal cortex. It's in the outside of the brain, last area to develop. And it's where all of our rational thought, our impulse control, all of that that's where all of it is housed. It's our consciousness. So, and just as a caveat to this, it's not fully developed until we're about 25. So if your kids start using at 16, they're not even really able to mitigate risk like we can as an adult, which is a whole nother discussion that I could talk about for hours, but just wanted to make sure that was you understood that as well. So that prefrontal cortex is the angel. That prefrontal cortex has to learn that using drugs hurts me. because you got the devil, the subconscious, saying using drugs helps me. And the two are at war. And when they're right in the middle of active use, that devil is strong. It's taken over everything. Treatment is about strengthening the angel. Okay. It's about getting them to see how the drugs are hurting them, right? It's learning. And this is why I always say, in order for people to stop, typically the pain of active use has to be less than the pain of sobriety. Pain of sobriety is huge. I know I'm going kind of fast here, but when you're talking to your son, the more you can understand about biology, the less stigma is attached to you saying it, because he's probably going to believe he's got this. Usually when we're in treatment, or when people are in treatment, they don't have access to the drug. That devil's not as strong, because that's how we're wired. If we don't have access to food, right, from a survival standpoint, why do we want to be obsessed with it all the time? So the less access we have, the less the craving is. Then, so you think you got it beat when there's no cake in the fridge, right? And the next thing you're in a bakery and you got a whole cake with a fork, right? The more access, the more access we have. So if he's in treatment and he might be saying, I got this kicked, Mom, I don't need more than 30 days. I'm good. I got it. And then he gets out and he has access and he doesn't got it. Sometimes that's really, sometimes they're not lying, you guys. I know we kind of come from a place where we think they always are. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're in treatment and they're in pain and they want out and they want to use. We're never going to know what's happening exactly. But if you're looking to have a conversation with him, talk to him from the standpoint of the brain. His brain won't be well for 6 months to a year after he stops using. Okay. That's
really
when
important.
the devil angel fight gets a lot easier. So if that's the case, why do we think in 30 days they should just be able to walk away and never look back? It's really difficult.
I know the science behind it is so important. That changed the way I thought about things when I was able to understand that. And you just did a really great job of explaining it, because it's very complicated. So to make it simple is not that easy. I always tell people it was the nines. It was 90 days. I started to see a difference in my daughter. 9 months. I really started to have hope that, she was really starting to feel like herself again. And then 18 months. By 18 months, I was like, holy Christmas, you're back, And so I do think it takes a long time. And we have to, learn about post-acute withdrawal syndrome. We have to learn about what it looks like in recovery, because the first year of my daughter's recovery was ugly. And the first 6 months, I remember thinking, seriously, that's what I'm left with? This person that was like a little bit of a wild animal still. Yeah. I mean, she was just it was not my daughter. I didn't even know who she was in the beginning. And slowly but surely, it started to all come back. I did see somebody kind of had a follow-up question to that. Yep. What do you mean the pain of sobriety? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good question.
Great question.
Especially from if you're somebody who has not had to go through this. Yeah. So, or had, and a lot of us had never seen this up close. Sobriety, becoming sober is a monumental feat. Especially if you've been using for any length of time and you've had things happen, like I describe in my book, the things that happened to my daughter while she was using made her feel like there's no point. So instead of and this is what I worry about is that people think, well, they got to hit rock bottom, but sometimes they don't see any end to this other than death or continued use. So we don't want to let that happen either. But I think that, getting to the point where you're sober is incredibly, incredibly difficult. Right. Just what you said, the fighting the brain. Who does that and successfully, right?
A moment of sobriety. I mean, you guys see how obsessed your loved ones are with finding their drug when they're sober, right? That is all that neurology. And like Maureen said, first of all, you got the pain that was there that predated the use. That's what I see as the problem. The use is not the problem, you guys. I know we focus on it and think that it is, but it is not the problem. The problem was there before the use started, right? There was a problem, depression, anxiety, ADHD, bullying, trauma. I mean, there's so many different things that could have created this. And there was a problem, and then the drugs came in and took away the pain. And then, like Maureen said, while they're on the drugs, more bad stuff happens. They do bad stuff to people they love, which is also traumatic, which is another reason why it's so important we protect ourselves. We're actually helping them when we protect ourselves, right?
Yes.
But so you put all that together, and even a moment of sobriety is painful for your loved ones. So what you got from the outside looking in, we think this drug is creating pain. It's the drug that's creating the pain. And for us, that might be true, but we can't deny the fact that they're actually escaping the pain with the drug, right? When I'm working with somebody, my first question to them, if they're not immediately looking to get into treatment, is what is this drug giving you? I want to talk about the good stuff. They wouldn't be using it unless there was good stuff. And we villainize it and just act like it's all bad. And for them, it's not.
Well, I mean, sometimes people just start because it's fun, right? Because if it wasn't fun, people wouldn't try it. And they don't realize they're going to go down that path. But a lot of times there's insecurities and just, I mean, I remember when I was a teenager, everything was a major, like even the smallest things. Looking back now, it's comical to me, the things that I was upset about. And I think that hadn't my daughter had the opportunity to try drugs, she would have gotten through it to the other side. But she did, and she did try drugs, and she's got a genetic predisposition and had that in her personality or in her chemical makeup, so it clicked. And I mean, so what happened after was all the trauma. What happened before might have or might not have been typical adolescent angst, and that sometimes that's what happens.
Even peer pressure, I see as pain.
Absolutely.
Right? So
Yes.
even though they might have started it, because typically they're not starting it to have fun, they're starting it because somebody's pressuring them to join, right?
Yeah.
Then comes the fun, and then comes the lack of the brain starts to learn that there's that this removes the pain, any pain that they have in their lives. It makes them feel a part of something.
Yeah.
So there's but there's always a foundation. You got to remember underneath the use, right? There's the use itself is typically the symptom of a larger problem, especially once they're well into their addiction. And we usually don't even know that they're well into their addiction.
Yep.
We usually find out about the addiction once they're already pretty advanced or fairly advanced.
There's that great, I think it's Desmond Tutu quote, "We've got to stop pulling people out of the river and going," I'm butchering it, but figuring out why they fell in the first place. Exactly. That's really not the quote at all, but that's the gist of the quote. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you want to read the next one?
Sure. I think the next one came up here. My son has been in treatment. Oh, this is Christy. My son has been in treatment for 8 months. He left his sober living, still struggling. Here is my question. I am in Florida. He is in California. One of his really good friends just overdosed on opioids laced with fentanyl. He is not going to make it. We are devastated. He is talking about coming home for the funeral. He has been gone for 10 months. How should I handle this? I do not think this is a good idea for him to be here. Yeah, I do know her story. Hi, sweetie. The stress, the triggers, it's terrifying. Any thoughts? Such a wonderful person and a devoted mother, and really struggling with her son's use and trying to do the right thing for him. I mean, ultimately, we're in control of whether they come back or not, if they come back to our house. But if they have their own finance, if they're able to finance the trip, there's, we got to really think about what we have control over. Yeah. Unfortunately.
We can always voice a concern, but that's where we have to end it, right? Ask a question like, I hope you have come up with a solid plan.
Yeah.
And I think that's about all we can do.
I mean, it would be a lot to ask, but maybe there's a friend or a family member of her son's friend that would be able to say, listen, you can't do anything to help here. continue to work on your sobriety, and that will be the best thing that you can do, in your friend's memory. It's yeah, that's a tough one.
I do want to piggyback, though. I obviously don't know your financial circumstances, but I wouldn't be the one to finance the ticket if I don't feel like it is something that's positive.
No, I wouldn't either.
That's what we do have control over. We don't have control over their decisions, but we do have control over what we choose to finance. And if you don't feel like it's a positive investment in your child's recovery, then you have every right to say, no, I'm not going to pay for it. But if you want to come home, you can find your own way here. And, I'll be here and whatnot, but I just don't feel comfortable buying you a ticket right now.
Oh, Kevin saved me with the quote. There comes a point when we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we have another question. My 30-year-old son has been in long-term treatment for over a year, is living on his own now, but not interested in any 12-step meetings to aid in his sobriety. He has said it is not for him. He feels it's not empowering and has resisted 12-step meetings in the past. Should I keep encouraging him to consider going to meetings and getting a sponsor, or do I just do nothing? Or can you suggest something in between? Yeah, this is something, how often do we see this, Maureen?
A lot.
A lot.
But I can speak from personal experience. My daughter felt the same way. And she's got over 3 years now. She found a community in the church that she goes to. And I think that idea of community is really important, whether it be a hiking group or a biking group, or, I don't know, because think about it, that's where a lot of people have problem with, like, they can't go to the bar anymore. They can't hang out with their friends. So that finding community and not isolating is incredibly important. She found that doing that and going to therapy to talk about the addiction issues and finding the community separate was more helpful for her. And I think that, it's his path and he's got to decide what's best for him.
Yep, totally agree.
And that's scary.
Yep.
But it's not for everybody.
No,
it's not.
You might want to just suggest to him he do some looking into some other forms of support groups too, because there's Refuge Recovery, there's Now Stay Sober, they're not all 12-step based anymore. There's a lot of different variations of, supportive environments. Going to church, like Maureen said, any positive community that he can get himself connected to is going to be positive. But again, you can't force that.
Yeah, I know that on the North Shore of Massachusetts right now, they just started. And these exist all over the place, but this group of people they're going on bike rides together, they're doing hikes together, they're doing activities like once a week, and that's a community too, and it's a sober event too. So that would have to be something sober, I think, for it to be helpful.
We have Herren Project runs, which is a lot of that. We have family members. It's how the Herren Project funds itself and how we're able to go out there and help people get into treatment that couldn't afford it, or help them with sober living scholarships if they can't afford it. Is people run different races and raise money for us as they're doing it. And that's become a sober community for many people. And that's how they stay connected, is through their running.
Boston Bulldogs, and they have groups all over the state of Massachusetts, and I think in a couple of other places, but they're always looking to start new groups in other places too. And they're a running club, a sober running club for families too. You can be a family member and join. There's so many things like that. So I don't always think it has to be a meeting even. And I know that she tells me that she had problems going to the meeting and everybody talking about the addiction and talking about it. It just didn't work for her.
Yeah, everybody's different. We have a saying in this field, many pathways to recovery, and there are. Your son also might have a difficult time with AA and 12-step because he's being held accountable there, and he's not quite ready to be held accountable like that. And that's still a part of his journey, and we have to be okay with that. We can't force it. He's going to, maybe in time, I've seen many people come around and enjoy AA and have it be a very, very big part of their recovery. But sometimes it takes a little while. It takes them really being willing to listen to what other people are saying in order to get there. So recovery is a journey, not a destination, my friends. I wish your kids and your loved ones would all wake up one day and be in recovery, but it just doesn't work like that. It's 2-3 steps forward, 1 step back.
I love meetings. I always found them really inspiring,
You do?
So I didn't understand why she didn't want to go, but I also knew that it was not mine to fix and it was
Yeah.
hers to decide what she was going to do. And usually the reminding and the harping and the, the suggesting,
Yeah.
usually it doesn't bode well for the whole of a relationship.
Yep. I always say suggest once and then they've heard it. They know what you
Right.
said the first time. Okay. If you start saying it again after that, you actually might be more likely to have them not go.
I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when it comes to being, if you're a parent or the person that's very close to them. I mean, it's they're in essence, your loved ones, no matter what age they are stuck in those teenage years because most of them have never really been able to progress out of it and mature out of that. So a lot of the, like with my 14-year-old son, I typically take the approach of, hey, it's your life, just don't call me if it blows up.
Yeah.
And that usually gets him to think about it a little more. But if I'm prodding him, I'm
Yeah.
going to lose him. Right. So we
Yeah.
got to try to stay in that place of one suggestion. And then
I think that's really important. Yeah.
you want to read the next one?
Sure. My son experienced a few concussions playing sports in high school. I read that this can contribute to drug use. At times, I wish I never let him play. He is in rehab now and has been many times, but I feel that these concussions played a role in his addiction. What do you feel? I'm going to give this to you because I have a feeling that you have a good take
I
on
don't
this.
think we're just starting to understand how concussions affect people going forward. So, is it possible if there was damage to the prefrontal cortex that he could end up having emotion regulation issues? We see tons of anger and things like that, and that could have contributed to his substance use disorder and his substance use. Absolutely, it's possible. Um, I don't know that you're going to have the answers to that anytime soon. You may never. I do, however, also think that there's usually not just one reason that somebody ends up using substances. So I would try really hard not to blame yourself. I know saying that to a parent who's in this place is a very, very difficult task. And, but it's not your fault. Who knows what would have happened and where his life would have ended up if you had said no football. I don't know how big football was
Right.
in his childhood. If it's something that he loved and he got self-esteem from, not letting him play could have had really disastrous effects as well. So I would try really hard not to go to that place where this is the only reason why he ended up with substance use disorder and it's all my fault because I let him play, because that's probably very, very far from reality. There was probably many different circumstances that came into play that got him there. One of them might just be genetics.
Mm-hmm.
The thought that none of our kids are ever going to crack a beer or smoke a joint. I want that. That's my wish for this world. And I don't want to normalize it anymore, that it's normal for kids to do that. But I also am not naive enough to think that my child is never going to try either. They are. And a lot anyways, I think we're getting better now. There's a lot of kids that aren't doing that, but there still are a lot that do.
Yeah.
And if they have the genetic predisposition, like Maureen said, it's
Yeah. I
the
mean,
rest
I
of
think as parents, we try to search for that thing that we did wrong because well, first of all, we want to think we're more in control than we actually are. But I think too that, we just beat ourselves up so much. So we try to look for the thing that we did wrong. And that's the reason why it's my fault.
Yeah.
But it does because so many other people have had that exact same, concussion history and they didn't go to drugs. And you know what I mean? So we can't do that to ourselves. And there's no way, like you said, of pinpointing exactly why someone began using drugs. Could
No,
be anything.
no. And I mean, I'll be honest right now that I tried substances when I was young and it was not my parents' fault. It wasn't. It had nothing to do with them. They were
Yeah.
wonderful and amazing and loving and caring, and I was lucky there. I didn't. I tried it because of peer pressure and wanting to be a part of a crowd. I'm lucky I didn't end up with substance use disorder. I'm grateful every single day that I didn't. I don't know what separates me out from the other
Right.
people in my childhood and in my life that did. But it wasn't my parents.
Right. And it was not some, force of will of your own either. It just didn't happen, right?
No,
Right. So it just doesn't make, yeah.
I tried hard, I think. And I was lucky that it didn't stick.
Yeah.
I do think genetics probably played a factor in it, that I have some kind of protective force that made it easy for me to wake up one day and be like, I don't like this anymore. I want to make something of my life. I don't want to make $8 an hour bagel port for the rest of my life. And I, like I said, I don't know what separates some people out from others, because I had plenty of people around me that were no different than me that ended up with serious addictions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and a lot of them came from very loving, caring families. So
Right.
that wasn't their parents' fault either.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of, we don't really understand it.
No, we don't.
So do you want to read the next one?
Sure. How does the dialogue change? I think this is supposed to say addiction. When addiction to substance use disorder, there are significant mental health challenges. Do you?
In addition to substance use disorder, there are significant, oh boy, it does, well, so many of our loved ones have, whether it was chicken or the egg, whether, one it occurred before the other, who knows, but then wind up having at least, depression and anxiety. But it makes treatment so much harder, because there are so many facilities out there that say they're co-occurring, that they treat both and that, and treat both equally. And it's just not true. So when someone has a significant mental health issue, I think it's important to treat the mental health issue.
Well, so when we're assessing to see where somebody should go, right? What you want to do is you want to try to figure out, and this is not always easy, but what is primary? And it's not necessarily your job as the family or the loved ones to try to figure this out, but what is the primary presenting issue right now? What's the primary problem? Okay. If I'm working with somebody who, say, is psychotic, and they've been abusing a psychostimulant like Adderall or crystal meth, right? And oftentimes psychosis comes with that. Even though they're probably not schizophrenic, I'm still going to send them to a mental health facility to deal with the psychosis, because nobody can deal with the addiction, the substance side of it, until they're not psychotic anymore. So if somebody is suicidal, actively suicidal, probably going to want to deal with the mental health issue before dealing with the substance use. I have a dream that eventually this is all going to end up the same. So all facilities will be equipped, because I see substance use disorder as an offshoot of the mental health system anyways. But we have to work with what we have right now. So if the primary issue is opiates, right, and the addiction is driving it, and then because of that they become depressed or anxious, that's the substance use treatment, substance use track, right? If you have severe trauma in somebody's history that's led to a lot of depression and anxiety, and then they're abusing substances on top of that, then mental health. But this is a murky,
It's very murky. And I see too many, and I would like to think it's changing in the last 4 or 5 years, but I don't believe it is. I see too many people coming out with this suitcase full of medication out of treatment. And they've got the gabapentin, and they've got the Seroquel, and they've got Wellbutrin, and they've got they're on 5 different medications. And meanwhile, they really haven't been observed for a very long time before being prescribed these things. And they're in detox, they're being prescribed these things, and you don't know how they would present if they didn't have drugs in their system, and if they didn't have drugs in their system for a period of time. I'm not a doctor, but there's something wrong when everyone is getting the same 5 drugs.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either, Maureen, especially knowing what we know about the brain. I think that giving somebody a bit of an antidepressant boost while they're going through that first year can be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But a whole pharmacy is probably not necessary. I think doctors are trying to help people with the symptoms of the first year of recovery, but all they're ending up doing, I feel like, and again, I'm not a doctor either, but what I feel like I see is just more issues with the brain chemistry, because we're not actually fully allowing the brain to heal. So But again, you guys don't have control over that. So all you
Right.
can do is make suggestions and then take a step back, and they have to make all of their own choices when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, my real problem with that is when that prescription comes without any therapy, it comes out without any aftercare. It's just a suitcase full of medication, and it's not magic medication. I mean, these problems all still have to be worked through. So,
And
yeah,
I am licensed in the state of Massachusetts to diagnose people. And I am going to tell you right now that I am not going to diagnose anybody with anything unless I have seen them sober for more than 6 months. So, I mean, I have to diagnose, but I'll give them like depression, anxiety,
right.
maybe, addiction to a substance. Sometimes maybe PTSD if I know there's a lot of trauma, but I'm not going to diagnose, like I just said before. I see facilities diagnosing people with schizophrenia all the time that are using crystal meth. And I'm like, oh, dear Lord, like, we don't know that this person has schizophrenia until they have been off a psychostimulant for 6 months to a year.
Right.
So just, if your kids get upset about some of the diagnoses that they have, tell them not to, like, don't worry about that right now, because your brain, you got to give your brain time to heal before anyone's going to really know if you're bipolar or schizophrenic or any of the biggies that get people really upset.
And a lot of these doctors graduated at the bottom of their class. Let's remember that. So we can't. It's always good to have a second opinion if it doesn't resonate, if it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Oh,
So my son says he's not using currently. He has history of use and history of rehabs, but I cannot know for sure as he does not live with me. I'd really like to know, but not sure how to broach the topic. I don't financially support him these days, so cannot threaten any financial pullback. Do I simply tell him that it's important to me to know as a reason to request a drug test? Any other thoughts, suggestions, or is this something I should not be asking? Thank you.
he does not live with her. I mean, I think that
Or
I mean, if I was working with this person, I would probably say that it's time to pull back. That what are you going to discover? You know what I mean? He's either going to do it or he's not going to do it. You can't run in and save the day, even if it, I don't know. I think I would suggest to pull back.
And I 100% would suggest to pull back. I would love to see you work on your relationship with him and spend a little bit more time asking him how his day was and how his week was and what things in life he's enjoying. Try to connect with him on a human level. Try not to make everything about the addiction. Just loving him right now and being there for him, with him, like he's another human being on this planet, is actually going to be more of what he needs than anybody policing his active use. And of course, on the flip side, if you start to see things, okay, that you're concerned about, be honest. Be honest about the things you're seeing, the behaviors. I often say to families, how about we focus a little bit more on what we're seeing, the behaviors associated with addiction, than the use itself.
I had a great conversation with my daughter early on, and I explained to her like how we had a very open conversation about what I saw when she would have a recurrence, when she would have a relapse. So I mean, because there were signs I would see them, things that she would do. She would stop calling, only texting. She would start isolating. There were just things that she would do. And then before you knew it, she was using again. So I said to her, if I see these things, would you be open to me saying something? And she agreed. And it was awesome because I asked her instead of telling her. So we had a really good conversation. And I acknowledge that it's very likely, hopefully, that I'm wrong, but you may not even see that you're doing these things sometimes. So it may be a good way to, a good barometer, because I'm watching because I love you. I'm not watching but I'm watching and because I'm scared. And I was honest about that. And that was like another thing, her not answering the phone. If I called, I didn't want her to, have to answer every time I called. But if she didn't get back to me, I got scared. And she understood that. So she would just text me, I'm in the middle of something, I'll call you later. And I would be like, okay, that's my mature daughter's response to me being just a little crazy still. And, and she understood that. So maybe it's a good idea to just have a really open conversation about how scared that you still are, because you love him and you want him to be okay, and you don't want to be asking him these questions, and you want to stop. And maybe if we have this conversation, it would be easier to stop pushing for things like a drug test.
Yep, totally agree. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, we want to know because it makes us feel safer, but we need to know a little bit too about what they need while also discussing what we need, right? Just like Maureen just said. So asking your son, what does he need to stay sober, right? What does he need from you? Where can you be beneficial to him? Instead of, because and trying to stay also, by the way, with I statements, I notice you use a lot of them, Maureen.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to, when we're angry or scared or fearful, we you. Oh, you know, and then sometimes there's expletives and name calling that come. I know this because I have done it myself in my past history. Instead, being able to say, I'm scared because I worry about losing you. I need to know you're okay. I know maybe sometimes it seems a little crazy, but is there any way you could just text me back so I don't have to sit in that scared place, so I know you're okay?
Yeah, it took a long time to like really, and anybody that's works with me knows I say this all the time. Anything we do is about us. It's not about, they can't make us do anything. They can't make us crazy. They can't make us respond in any way. We are doing the things we're doing because of ourselves. And you have to own that, you know, and sometimes you're wrong and sometimes you're right, but it's all your own stuff.
Absolutely. I just a few weeks back, and then we'll get to the next question, but somebody asked me how I was able, like, how the heck was I ever able to forgive my ex-husband, right? I lost my house. I was completely financially ruined. And my answer is always, I had to take responsibility for my part in it. Now, back then, would I have said that? No, it was all him. It was all his fault, right? He was the sick one. But as I went through my journey and learned more and more and more about substance use disorder and about codependency, and I was able to take responsibility for my choices in where we ended up. And that's how I ended up being able to forgive him.
And boy, what a weight off of you that is.
It
I'm
does,
sure.
it really,
Yeah.
because I don't have to hate him anymore. My God, hating him was exhausting. It really was, right? So you gotta work towards forgiving, and it's not always just for them. Oftentimes it's for us too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
I like this question. Would the addition of self-harm indicate more of a mental health issue?
not necessarily. I have worked a lot with self-harm over the years. I actually started off my career working with people who had lots of trauma, and there was lots of self-harm. I always suggest people try to think of self-harm more from the standpoint of an addiction, because it is an addiction, and it's really hard for us to feel comfortable. It took me a while to feel comfortable with self-harm, to be able to sit in the room with somebody who is harming and see the scars, and because it feels very brutal. But most people who self-harm are not suicidal. Okay. There are some, but most of the time people who are self-harming are doing it because with the adrenaline rush, like when you cut, you do get endorphins and adrenaline. So it becomes an addiction. And most of the time people are cutting so they can get the release that they feel after the cut. Usually there's some self-hatred paired in there too, but there is with heroin use and every other
Right.
as well. That's not unique to self-harm. So not necessarily. I'm not saying that, you know, self-harm isn't part of mental health issues. It is, but I think it's in the same way that every other type of addiction is a part of a mental health issue. So definitely want to get your kid help, or your loved one help. And you can't really send somebody who's self-harming to a rehab. So that you can't, that's rehabs or rehabilitation usually for substance use. So it would be more of a mental health track. Yes. But is it necessarily just a mental health issue? No. It's actually an addiction. It's an addiction that's treated by the mental health system as opposed to being treated by the substance use system.
It's tricky.
Tricky.
It's like bulimia and anorexia, eating disorders.
Yep.
It's tough stuff when they're paired with a substance use disorder, because a lot of places won't take you if you have a eating disorder, or if you're self-harming, or if you have suicidal ideation. They're not going to take you there because they're not equipped to handle that. But so it's the chicken or the egg, which came first, right?
It is, and it's very common today too. I feel like this is the one that parents struggle with the most, because it's really hard for us to be able to understand it. And I mean, you can understand somebody smoking a joint. It's really hard to understand somebody cutting their own flesh. But if you get down and really break it down with people, it's usually the same exact reasons that somebody is smoking a joint. There is a release that people get from, and unfortunately, our kids are sharing this with each other. So for that peer pressure, the same reason why, our kids eventually end up picking up a beer, that's why they're giving it a go, because they're in pain. And somebody says, oh, have you tried this? It really works for me. And then they try it. So,
There's a lot of pain out there.
oh, tons. So the next one, it's fairly common. You want to read it?
So this woman's son is currently sober, but a woman always leads him to relapse. He knows they recommend 1 year of no women, but is sex and untreated addiction.
Yes. Yep.
I mean, I think that, it alleviates pain, right? It makes you feel better. Mm-hmm. You can forget yourself in another person for a little bit.
Yep.
It makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, there's always there's a lot of people that don't love themselves, so they look to other people for that. And so it could, maybe it's not an addiction, but maybe it could just be that feeling of unworthiness, that you fill the hole with another person. Yep. And even if it's just fleeting and and it's maybe the challenge is over and it's one person after another, but it's I definitely think that this is all part of it all too often.
Yeah. I love how you just used filled the hole, because that's what I think of. There's a void when your kids stop using, right? When they're trying to be sober, they don't have any coping skills, you guys. Like, I have a whole laundry list of things I do when I'm starting to struggle emotionally that help keep me well. I mean, it's taken me a long time to develop it, but oftentimes we develop those in our teen years. So most of your loved ones started using drugs. That's their coping mechanism. So now all of a sudden they're sober, and we think it's like the best thing that's ever happened since sliced bread, but they are in an extreme amount of pain with zero ability to cope. So anything that makes them feel better, and sex makes you feel better. Love makes you feel better. Like, the high that I get off of a new relationship is amazing, right? All of us. It feels great when somebody loves you. All of a sudden, somebody new. It becomes the way that you're coping. But yes, it will eventually lead to relapse if you're putting all of your coping mechanisms into another person in the way that they make you feel. It's probably going to eventually lead to relapse. But again, it's his journey. And maybe it won't. One time it might not. One time he might end up going, I got to stop doing this and stop sticking my hand in the fire and get to more meetings. Because I've seen that happen too. But it's his recovery. It's his journey. And he's got to figure it out. And this is a real common one. They wouldn't have the rule if it wasn't common. It happens regularly. We see it all the time.
I mean, I can't say enough about how much a really good therapist with training in trauma and PTSD and addiction, and kind of almost in that order. I think that the importance of that. There were, people always worry about enabling. And for me, there were two things that I would always pay for. I would always pay for her phone because I wanted her to be able to get in touch with me. It was not for her, it was for me. And I would always pay for therapy. And I still help her with that because I find it so important that it's to have a good therapist is probably the biggest gift you can give somebody that's going through this. So maybe that's an answer too, is to find somebody that he can sort this stuff out with. And it's not mom or dad. It's just not, because this is nothing that your child is going to listen to you tell them about. It just goes in one ear and out the other. You don't understand. You don't understand me. They haven't learned that we're all very much alike yet. So it needs to be a third party, I think.
Right. And I I just want to throw out there too, and not in a critical way, but if we can try to take a step back and out of the judgmental piece of this, which is so hard to do. I mean, I still feel myself doing it sometimes, even with people that aren't my loved ones, but try to understand that he's in a lot of pain, and that's why he's doing this. He's not actually doing this because he doesn't want to be sober. Most of the people I work with want to be sober more than anything else in this world. They just don't know how to be sober yet. And it's a long road to figure that out. Mm-hmm. So he might be using love and or sex to help him manage that pain right now. He'll eventually figure out that doesn't work, and he'll try something different. And the something different might not be what you choose either, but that's what he's got to figure out. And the more we can just take a step back and love and step out of the judgment piece, the more they're going to tell you, the more they're going to talk to you. It's kind of how it works. Did you find that, Maureen? Did you find that when you weren't asking as many questions or forcing as much of your opinion, your daughter talked to you more?
I wish I had learned that a long time ago with just raising kids in general. I mean, just to be an ear and stop having so many opinions, because, it's, and nobody needs my little helpful tips unless they ask for them. You know what I mean? Because I'm full of helpful little tips. And, I even see now with all of my kids, I start that. And, the older ones, as they get older, it gets a little bit easier, but I mean, they just didn't want to hear anything I had to say. It would be much more successful if I would have listened more and talked less.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that with my teen. Even as a therapist, you guys, I struggle personally.
The whole MI, the motivational interviewing, like trying to get them to figure it out. You can lead them a little bit, I think, as a parent, but asking those open-ended questions, like, well, what do you think that's going to look like in a year or so? What do you, just things, where do you want to be in a year? What is it? I don't know, I off the top of my head, but asking those open-ended questions to help them get to the point where they can see it themselves without you saying it.
Absolutely. And sometimes I will say to my child, I'm not the person for you to talk to about this. Yeah. Because I'm too emotional, and I have a real, I really want you to do this. So I get that you have your own opinion. Go talk to somebody else about it.
It's okay to be human as a parent.
It's totally okay to be human. Yeah. So, okay, you guys, I think we're nearing the end here. Any last minute anything, Maureen?
No, nothing I can think of. I know that in Magnolia, sometime at the end of the month, is going to be launching Zoom meetings. I know that you already have Zoom meetings, and I think they're very helpful. So it would, I'd appreciate it if you'd share that.
Oh, absolutely. So up on the Herren Project website, you can go in there. There's a support tab or a tab for family support. And under that is another tab for support groups. Kevin's going to post it down in the chat box for those of you that are on the webinar. And you can sign up. They're completely free. They're all run by licensed clinicians. We have all sorts of different times. We have family groups. We have groups specific to parents. By the way, the family group also includes friends. I always like to throw that out there. Anybody who loves someone who's struggling with substance use disorder can join one of our family groups. We have parent groups. We have a spousal support group, because being a spouse sometimes is very different than being a parent. Like I said, all run by licensed clinicians. We do also have grief groups for people who have lost a loved one to addiction. All free. Sign up. You can come when you want. You don't have to come. There's no obligation. You just log on and and I find the Zoom to be actually pretty cool. We've been doing it long before COVID. Mm-hmm. So if there's any of you that are a little apprehensive because of the Zoom stuff, it's pretty easy, and the group still, we feel very cohesive. So definitely work.
I think it's great. I really do. And I think because there's so many people across the country that don't have access to meetings even beyond COVID, or wouldn't walk in. And now they have the ability, because you can turn off your video, you put your little Bo Peep on there, nobody knows who you are. And I think that, and you can still ask questions. Yep. So I think that, and be involved. I think it's just, these things are really great. We're a little late to the party, but I'm concerned about what the upcoming winter and how locked down we're going to be. So we're launching that now too. It'd probably be up sometime around the beginning of November, the end of October.
Awesome. Very excited. And also, for those of you that don't know the other programs we offer, if you do have a loved one that's struggling to find good treatment, they can go right on our website, fill out a little box, and we'll give them a call, or they can call us directly. We have a whole treatment navigation team that will help them find good treatment in good facilities that we have personally vetted. And we like to take that off of the family's shoulders. So instead of you guys doing all of the research and then presenting something to your loved one, just give them our number, and they'll call us, and we will do our best to get them into a good, solid program if that's what they want. Always like to follow up with, though, we do need to talk to them directly. So I wish we could make all your loved ones go to treatment, but unfortunately we can't. So
Can't do that?
No.
Oh, that's too bad.
We used to try, and we did a lot of work, and a lot of people didn't end up going. So we learned our lesson. So,
Yeah.
But they also don't need to want to go to treatment to call us. They can just call us and find out what their options are and what
That's even an intervention, an honest interventionist will tell you that about 70-80% of the time they don't go, but maybe they go later because now they've been presented with information.
Yep.
So, that's just as valuable. And
that none of the people that work for us are going to pressure them and tell them they have to go to treatment. They can just call and talk. And currently both the people that are doing that are in recovery, so they understand.
That's good. And I'm, always available too if anybody wants to contact me directly. Okay,
Maureen. Well, this was awesome. I love doing this. Thank you so much to everybody who participated today, and we will be back next month.
All right. First Tuesday of the month.
First Tuesday of every month.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.